My friends and pupils, 57 years have passed since my graduation in medicine. Perhaps the best use I can make of the 10 minutes at my disposal in these unfamiliar surroundings is to strike a personal note and to recall a few of my experiences during this most eventful period in the history of medicine. Success is so largely dependent upon opportunity, an opportunity upon chance, that I count myself fortunate in both regards. Fortunate in my student and early graduate days, my special interest was turned to those subjects, pathology and bacteriology, which were destined to play so important a part in the transformation of the science and art of medicine. Fortunate that in the pursuit of these studies, I came under the influence of such masters as Waldeyer, Recklinghausen, Ludwig, Cohnheim, Weigert, and Robert Koch, and formed those enduring associations and friendships with fellow students such as Ehrlich, Salomonsson, and Bruton. Fortunate that 54 years ago, I had the opportunity to start laboratories for training and research in these newer fields, first in New York, and later and more adequately in Baltimore. And fortunate above all that throughout all these years I have had such assistants and pupils and colleagues as have accompanied me and to whom I am eternally grateful. I'd like to recall that wonderful summer semester of 1877 in Breslau, so charmingly described by Carl Salomonsson in his letter to Ehrlich, published in March 1914 in the Berliner Klinische Wochenschrift. Those were memorable and inspiring days in which to have lived, with Cohnheim elaborating his theory of tumors, with Weigert staining bacteria in sections, making discoveries at the autopsy table and with a microscope, and with Ehrlich, still a student, continuing his studies of mast cellen and of saws in coloring tissues and cells with aniline dyes. The memory which I especially cherish of those early Breslau days is meeting Robert Koch before the days of his great public fame, when he came down from Breslau to show his earliest bacteriological work to the botanist Ferdinand Kohn and to Cohnheim and Weigert. We had even then some glimmering sense that these discoveries marked a new era in medicine. When 7 years later, I had the good fortune, following my call to Johns Hopkins, to follow the first course in bacteriology given by Robert Koch in the University of Berlin, the dawn, the glorious sun of the new day was well above the horizon. Recently, at the centennial commencement of New York University, I had the opportunity to express publicly my deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected and auspicious opportunity which presented itself to me on my return to New York in 1878 to open a pathological laboratory at the Bellevue Hospital Medical College and to display those professional wares which I had brought with me from Germany in 2 years' stay. Equipment and working conditions compared with those of today were primitive and crude, but they were largely compensated by the eagerness and enthusiasm of numerous pupils, by an abundance of pathological material, and by a rapidly growing appreciation of the significance of the newer pathology. None were more understanding and appreciative of the new venture at the college than Austin Flint, the elder, William Lusk, Edward Janeway, and Frederick Dennis. I've often told the story of the almost boyish enthusiasm with which Dr. Flint, then 70 years old, greeted the announcement of the discovery of the tubercle bacillus by Koch 50 years ago, a discovery in which he recognized the confirmation of his lifelong teaching of the unity of tuberculosis. All that had preceded was a preparation for the opportunity, then unique in this country, which was offered to me on my call to the Johns Hopkins University in 1884, 5 years before the opening of the hospital, and 9 years before that of the medical school. While the main attraction of the Baltimore position was the opportunity to devote myself entirely to pathology, I've always considered it an advantage that I knew from personal experience something of the problems of the practitioner as a result of my hospital internship and of 6 years of a small private practice in New York. Although I was impatient for the opening of the hospital, those early years in Baltimore were active and interesting, when with Councilman, Maul, Bolton, Abbott, and Nuttall, we conducted classes in pathology and bacteriology, attended by advanced students in pathology and by many physicians from Baltimore and from other parts of the country. In these years, I was especially interested in animal diseases, particularly in the study of hog cholera and of epidemic pleuropneumonia of cattle. The complete extermination of the latter disease in the early 90s in this country, constituting one of the great triumphs in the history of preventive medicine. With the opening of the hospital in 1889 and the coming of Osler and Kelly, Halstead was already on the ground, having been engaged for 3 years previously in experimental work in the laboratory. And with the opening of the medical school in 1893, the pathological laboratory entered upon its full life and became a center of teaching and research. From now on, the story is a familiar one, but there is no time to rehearse on this occasion. As I'm speaking more particularly of the influence of good fortune and opportunity upon my career, I may remark that the 80s and 90s of the last century, marked as they were by those discoveries in our knowledge of infectious diseases which transformed pathology from a static to a dynamic science, were a wonderful period for the development of pathological and bacteriological laboratories. Perhaps my greatest good fortune, certainly that which has given me the greatest joy and pride, has been in my pupils and their work, and especially in that remarkable line of assistants and associates in the pathological laboratory, up to the time of my retirement in the chair of pathology in 1916, Councilman, Maul, Bolton, Abbott, Nuttall, Flexner, Barker, McCallum, Opie, Whipple, and Winternet. There's no time to speak of later activities in launching, in association with Howell, the new School of Hygiene and Public Health, or the new Department of the History of Medicine. This latest activity has served to strengthen an opinion which I have long held, that nothing adds more to the interest and fascination of our profession than the study of the historical and cultural background of medicine and the natural sciences through the ages. And I venture to add that such study helps to make better teachers and better doctors. Among the thoughts which occur to one who has lived through the last 60 years of progress in medicine, one that comes to me forcibly at this moment is that while the general direction of advancement can be foretold, the particular lines opened by new discoveries are quite unpredictable, as may be illustrated by the discoveries in biophysics, biochemistry, immunity, and the virus diseases. I should love to return after half a century and see what is disclosed when the curtain is lifted for mysteries in these fields. It is safe to predict the prospect will surpass all that we can now conceive and imagine, and that the power of man over disease will be greatly increased.